Do you know what madness is? The United States government holds the world's largest gold reserves in Kentucky vaults, now worth $431 billion. But one thing kept me up at night. For more than 70 years, no one really verified what was inside. Not once. Not an appropriate audit. I am not talking about the conspiracy theories you read on Reddit at 2 a.m. I am talking about something that just happened in early 2026 that made Wall Street seriously ask questions. So stick to my point, because what we're about to discover could fundamentally change your view of American wealth and financial credibility. Fort Knox is more than just a random, hidden, forgotten military base in Kentucky. This is the United States Gold Reserve, the fortress in the fortress, which holds nearly half of the official gold reserve of the United States. What we're talking about is that, as of March 2026, 147.3 million ounces of gold were broken down into about 4,600 metric tons of physical gold stored behind these walls. Stretch gold end-to-end and ULLC more than 180 miles. Stack them into cubes about 21 meters on each side. This is not the pocket money we're talking about here. Before the world exited the gold standard, it was the underlying asset underpinning the entire American monetary system. When Roosevelt decided to concentrate American gold supplies during the Great Depression of the 1930s, Fort Knox became the answer. Construction began in 1936, and what they built was really impressive. A 22-ton blast door opened at the entrance. Granite and reinforced concrete lay on the walls. Heavily armed guards, moats, and surveillance systems are, by all accounts, the world's safest gold reserve on paper. But it is important that the last time the United States conducted a comprehensive physical audit of internal reality was in 1953. That was 73 years ago. At the same time, the internet revolution happened. We landed on the moon, we revolutionized global finance, but we still don't have a complete recount of what to lock in America as most important vault. The Treasury Department says gold is there and issues monthly statements about it. Some checks have been done, in any case only partially, but nothing can be seen as a comprehensive check of everything. When someone tells you to trust them but not to let you have nuclear weapons, that is when the red flag begins to fly, and that is where we are now. You might wonder why I am bringing this up now, why Fort Knox has suddenly become important again, where gold has been since 1937. Let me tell you what has changed, because such things have also caught my attention. In late January 2026, President Trump began auditing the noise at Fort Knox. And I mean serious noise. He wanted to go to Kentucky himself. He wants a transparent and comprehensive inspection of every bar in the vault. Just then, Elon Musk joined the conversation. Musk, who has been advising on government efficiency through something called Doge, offered live audits, documenting the process verbatim. On the surface, that sounds ridiculous, right? Why does the president need to go to the vault to verify that it is full? That is the point. This is important when billionaires and presidents ask for audits. This suggests that even those at the absolute highest levels of economic and political power believe there is enough uncertainty here to warrant investigation. As of February 2026, there were reports that a full audit would take at least 18 months, possibly longer. You are actually counting and verifying nearly 150 million ounces of gold, which means that each bar needs to be weighed, tested for purity, and cataloged into a system. This is an absolutely huge undertaking, and the fact that it has never been completed is incredible. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has made some interesting comments on why a full audit may be more complicated than people realize. He noted that many of the gold bars stored there, many of them so-called substandard or impure, might not meet current international trade standards. Consider that if the United States' largest gold reserves contain bars that do not meet modern international commercial purity standards, this is a huge problem, which means that a large portion of the $431 billion may not be as liquid or tradable as people imagine when they see the headline numbers. Let me be clear, there is no evidence that the gold was actually stolen from Fort Knox. Let me say it again, because it is important. There is no credible evidence that much gold has been lost. Conspiracy theories that have been circulating for decades, from the claim that all the gold is gone to the claim that the vault is completely empty, are untenable when you really see something in real time. But the line is blurring. Just because something is T-proven, does T mean it is definitely true? That is the real problem we're dealing with. The Fort Knox is empty story began circulating at least in the 1960s and 70s, when it was claimed that Mr. Roosevelt had moved gold elsewhere or in secret locations. Pop culture is even embroiled in the James Bond Goldfinger showdown. The film makes Knox Castle's mystery part of mainstream conversation and legend. Ron Paul, a member of Congress, became the most prominent audit advocate and has been pushing for years. If gold exists, why not prove it? His argument is straightforward. What is the government hiding? It seemed reasonable then, and frankly today. But the Treasury Department's position has remained unchanged for decades. They insist that all gold is accounted for through its internal record-keeping system. That spot checks, if not made public, are costly, time-consuming, and technically unnecessary because they have never lost track of gold. The question quickly became clear: why should we trust them? In the past, governments around the world had hidden financial problems, concocted numbers, and covered up facts. The Treasury Department's decades-long record of transparency is unknown. The change in 2026 is a direct shift from fringe conspiracy theorists to mainstream political discourse. When billionaires and presidents ask for audits, that is different from internet forums and alternative media. It really carries weight. This suggests that even at the absolute highest level, there is enough uncertainty to investigate. What fascinates me and should fascinate you is that it reveals a deeper trust in American institutions. The fact that we are still debating whether to verify what we call the largest financial assets in 2026 illustrates how transparency has become a luxury that is dangerous in the financial world. Forget conspiracy theories for a moment, and let's talk about what is wrong with Fort Knox. The composition of the gold stored there. Not all gold is equal, especially gold that has been stored for nearly a century. When gold was consolidated in Fort Knox in the 1930s, purity standards were completely different from those we have today. International commerce does not have the same specifications. Most of the gold in Fort Knox is stored in so-called high-quality delivery notes. Or more precisely, many of the gold does not meet the high-quality delivery standards of modern specifications. Modern London gold and silver market standards require bars to be at least 995 parts per thousand, or 99.5% pure, weighing between 350 and 430 ounces, properly stamped and certified for authenticity. A significant portion of Fort Knox's holdings do not meet these specifications, and we are talking about old bars with mixed alloy components that are less pure than modern standards. Here is where it has become important. If you want to sell gold on the international market, you usually have to refine it first, which requires money, time, and a certain proportion of the process. This means that the actual selling value of Knoxburg gold holdings may be much lower than the official valuation of $431 billion on the government's balance sheet. Only recently did anyone really talk about it publicly. In April 2026, reports surfaced that a large part of the Fort Knox reserve consisted of non-standard steel bars that were not suitable for international trade. The government has known this for decades, but ordinary Americans don't, and financial markets don't take it fully into account in their calculations. So when you hear $431 billion in gold, understand that the number has an asterisk and a warning. It is based on the spot price of gold multiplied by the official ounce. But the actual market value may be much smaller. Maybe 10 to 15% less, maybe more, maybe worse. No one knows for sure, because nothing has been thoroughly examined for more than 70 years. This is not conclusive evidence, nor is it evidence of gold theft, but it proves that the narrative around Fort Knox is much more complex than the official statement implies. And that complexity has a real impact on how we should think about America's future financial stability. Let us zoom in and talk about why Fort Knox suddenly became so important in 2026, because gold has been there since 1937 and can go anywhere, right? That is where you are wrong, and that is why it is more important now than ever. The global gold market is undergoing a real transformation. Global central banks are accumulating gold at a pace not seen in decades. China has been quietly accumulating foreign exchange reserves as Europe reconsiders its dependence on the dollar. According to data from early 2026, gold now accounts for 24% of global central bank reserves, surpassing 21% of U.S. Treasury bonds for the first time on record. This means that gold and institutions holding gold will become more strategic this month. If the world starts to question whether America's gold reserves are as solid and accessible as we claim, it will be bad for the dollar, bad for America's financial credibility on the global stage, and bad for everything else. Trust in institutions is eroding wherever you see it. After 2008, after the COVID-19 pandemic, and the unexpected arrival of inflation we did not foresee, people raised harder questions about the government's claims. They want verification, they want transparency, and when you refuse, people suspect they have a point. Operating in uncertainty also brings real economic costs. The right audit can take $50 million to $100 million to complete correctly. That sounds like a lot until you put it in the right place. It is actually equivalent to 0.00012% of the value of gold, which is presumed to exist. At that price, the United States could erase 70 years of speculation, conspiracy theories, and international skepticism about its most valuable financial assets. It is actually a good deal. China is watching every development, Russia is watching, and every country considering whether to hold gold against the dollar is watching whether the United States will verify its holdings. If we don't audit, what is the signal? What are we hiding? We don't have faith in what we have. The geopolitical dimension cannot be overstated. One of the few pillars supporting the dollar's dominance is the assumption that the United States has large verified gold reserves to support the dollar's credibility. We are in an era of unprecedented skepticism. If you open the curtains and find that gold reserves are less valuable or harder to obtain than advertised, you create a real problem that reverberates in global markets. Let's talk about logistics, because auditing is not as simple as counting the bars. When you store 147 million ounces in multiple vaults, you face several huge challenges at once. Physical inventory means that each bar needs to be removed from the warehouse, weighed on a calibrated scale, recorded in the system, and verified. For a professional team working inside a security facility, it was months of focused work. Purity testing is the next level. Complicating matters is that every bar is tested for gold. Some tests are non-destructive, like X-ray fluorescence, but more thorough methods require taking small samples from the bar itself. When you might test millions of bars, the process adds up in time and cost. Document reviews involve comparing current physical inventories with decades of records, identifying discrepancies, explaining discrepancies, and coordinating everything. The paperwork alone is shocking, and it hasn't even begun. Chain of custody checks mean understanding how each bar got to Danix Fort, which has been handling the bar for decades, whether it moved between vaults, and whether any records were modified at any time. Third-party verification introduces independent auditors, possibly international auditors, to verify the government's own count. This step is crucial to credibility because the Treasury's audit of the Treasury Department does not solve the problem of trust. By most estimates, a full audit takes 18 to 24 months and costs between $50 million and $150 million, depending on how thoroughly you want to test and verify. So expensive? Yes, indeed. Is it worth it, given the stakes and uncertainties that hang over everything? Sure. Interestingly, that is actually possible now. Fort Knox facilities are safe, well organized, and have the infrastructure to support audits without major changes. They don't need to tear down buildings or endanger safety. The main obstacles are political will and the enormous logistical support of the cause itself. A compromise has been proposed, a partial audit of 10 to 15% holdings as a statistically significant sample, rather than a full audit of 147 million ounces. This can take 3 to 6 months, be much cheaper, and provide real verification without full commitment. Whether this will satisfy global markets and answer the question of trust is a $1 billion question. What exactly does this mean for your money, and how should you view Fort Knox in the context of your financial strategy? Let me be blunt. Don't panic. Fort Knox is unlikely to actually be empty. Given the logistics and people involved, it is virtually impossible to move 147 million ounces of gold without attention. We're talking about a lack of transparency and potential overvaluation, not outright theft or some sort of large-scale cover-up, but understand what this reveals about America's fiscal credibility, because that is more important. When a government does not verify its most important assets, it sends a signal that we are not entirely confident in the narrative presented. Whether this is true or not, it is important that people believe it. This signal will affect how other countries view our currency, the long-term trajectory of the dollar, and your wealth, which you may not see immediately. If you hold gold, it is actually bullish on you and your position. Gold becomes more valuable when institutions are not trusted, central banks are not trusted, and confidence in fiat money begins to erode. The uncertainty surrounding Fort Knox, and the fact that we're having these conversations, are fuel for gold's appreciation over time as people seek what is real and tangible. Consider diversification too, not just in gold but also in assets that do not rely on government verification. Real estate, commodities, productive assets that generate income. The situation at Fort Knox is a microcosm of a larger truth. We are entering an era in which verification is more important than ever, in which transparent, auditable assets have real value in the market. Focus on the months and years ahead. If an audit does occur, pay close attention to the results. Yes, everything is here, everything is legal, an audit report said, a bullish bet on the dollar and a bearish bet on gold. However, if there are significant differences or problems in composition and purity, the impact will be huge on the dollar and hard assets. Bottom line, Fort Knox represents a $431 billion bet on America's financial credibility. And now the bet is based on assumptions that have not been tested in 70 years. Once again, let me narrow down what Fort Knox really represents in the economic context of 2026 and where we're headed. We are now in transition. For 80 years, the dollar has been the world's reserve currency, largely because of American military dominance and economic power, but also because of trust. Believe that U.S. finance is real, and when the United States says it owns assets, they actually exist and deserve compensation. Fort Knox was supposed to be the ultimate backstop of the trust because gold is real, limited, non-printable, and inherently valuable. The central bank holds it because of these assets, which is why it is so important in the conversation about the credibility of the United States. But if we don't verify Fort Knox, we're essentially telling the world to trust us anyway. And once trust erodes, rebuilding is very expensive. Ironically, a full audit, even if it finds problems, will actually strengthen the dollar for a long time, because transparency is problematic. If the United States comes forward and says, "This is the reality of Fort Knox. This is its real value. This is what we are doing on any issue," the market will respect this honesty, will stabilize, and will remove conspiracy theories from legitimate dialogue. Instead, we operate in a gray area where the truth remains uncertain, suspicions grow, conspiracy theories take root, and international competitors can nibble at the dollar's dominance one by one. Whether the audit actually took place remains to be seen. But the fact that the issue is being seriously discussed at the highest level, and that Trump, Musk, and members of Congress are all talking publicly, suggests that even those in charge are feeling the pressure. Like it or not, the curtains are closed, and whether we're ready or not, the answer will come. Here is what I want you to learn from everything we cover. Fort Knox is not empty, and this is not the real story we're retelling here. The real story is that we built the world financial system on an asset that hasn't been tested in practice for 70 years. It is a choice we collectively decided to accept, but we don't have to accept it anymore. In fact, in 2026, we finally raised serious questions about the situation in Fort Knox, which is actually healthy for all relevant personnel, which is accountability, which is the way the market requires transparency. Whatever happens in Fort Knox in the coming years will tell us where we are headed as an economy and as a country. After years of working in finance, I learned one thing: trust is always the most valuable asset, and Fort Knox is now the test of that. Let's see how the United States responded. Thank you for joining me in understanding what most people never thought. If you find this valuable, click on your favorite button to subscribe to more financial analysis that goes beyond the headline and into what really matters. In the comments below, tell me what you think. Should the United States audit Fort Knox? If they do, what do you want to know? I read these comments and I really want to hear what you think. See you next time.